Alright, so today we're gonna talk about the first big 5 steps of a pilot's career. This is the video I wish I could have seen before starting my whole career inside aviation. Before taking the decision of starting as a student pilot back when I was 17 years old. To be able to fully understand what I would learn, what I would see, practice, and experience inside this beautiful career. I am fully talking about general aviation, not military. If what you're seeking is to become an airline pilot, first you have to get 2 licenses and 2 ratings. Those are the private pilot license and commercial pilot license, as well as the instrument rating and multi-engine rating. There you have 4 steps. But actually, the most of us decide to take the 5th step, which is to become a certified flight instructor. Of course, we will dive deep into all those 5 steps further down the line in this video. Hi, my name is Jorge Muñoz. I'm a senior instructor pilot working in El Salvador. As you can see, this is a pretty goddamn long video, because we are going to dive deep into each and every course of the pilot's career. We will start our breakdown with a training overview, continue with the ground school portion, simulator hours and flight hours portion, final check rides, my own thoughts and personal advices, and a lot of other interesting insights of each one of the 5 courses of this career. Because of this, and as always, this video is going to be divided in different sections, so here in the screen you will see the timestamps for each specific section, and also you will find the timestamps linked in the description of this video and also in the pinned comment down below, so you can find in an easier way what you are looking for. And so you don't have to sit through this extremely long video if you don't want to. Originally, I posted a video for each training course, so it could be a little bit more specific for what each student pilot is searching for in a specific part of his or her career. I will leave the playlist of those videos in the description down below. And right now on the screen in case you want something a little bit more bite-sized. But then I thought about the position I was before starting this career, and how others might as well be in that same position. So I made this compilation of all those 5 videos, so that anyone can dive deep into what you can expect from this career. So now let's begin with the private pilot video. Alright, so today we're gonna talk about your private pilot license. This video is for those of you who are interested in starting a career as a commercial pilot, but you are not completely sure of what you're going to do or what you're going to study within the first months of your career. So, let's begin. As I just said, in this video we're gonna talk about what you can expect from your private pilot training. How does it work and what you will have to do. What you will experience during your first months inside the world of aviation. Okay, we all know or at least have an idea of what an airline pilot does for a living. They fly massive airplanes with lots of people inside them. That's the general concept of it. But how does this whole journey begins? Well, once you have already decided that you want to commit a part of your life to aviation, which are the first steps that you have to take? Which are some of the first emotions that you will experience during the first years of your career? Maybe you want a better idea of what you're getting yourself into. Well, if you are kind of interested in this topic, you'll probably already know that every pilot's journey begins with the private pilot license. This is the starting point of your career, and in this one, as well as in all the other licenses and certifications to come, they all have a theoretical and a practical part. First, we have the theoretical part, which is pretty similar to what you'll expect from a regular university, just with less people. You'll be in a comfy room with your teacher or your instructor in this case, standing in the front of the room while you sit on a chair and write your notes on a desk. Here it is where you will learn on paper everything that you need to know before jumping on the real airplane. And you need to know that tests and exams will become a new part of your routine during this time. You'll have to face tests for every single topic you learn. I guess we could say that for pilots, tests and exams are frequent at the very least. And of course, there is the practical part, the fun part, the flight hours, where you fly the airplane for real, where you practice and you put to the test everything that you have been learning on the ground. For your private pilot license, you will learn in the ground school, let's say for example about aerodynamics, how the airplane interacts with the air, with the atmosphere and with the temperature. You will learn about the parts, the instruments and the instruments of an airplane. How do they work? How to use them? How to read them correctly? I mean, for starters, you will have your airspeed indicator, your attitude indicator, your altimeter, turn coordinator, your compass, and much more. You will also learn about the engines of the airplanes that you're going to fly in your flight school. Also, obviously, you will learn how the airplane actually flies. How is it so stable in the air? Your instructor will also teach you about human factors. And human factors is a long and extensive topic, but here you'll basically learn how to use every single resource you have at your disposal in order to have a safe flight, or how to save the flight. You will also learn about some limitations of the human body and of our mind during the flight, and how even the teeny tiniest amount of drugs or alcohol could change our attitude while flying. Human factors is just an extensive but exciting topic that you will learn about. You will also learn about airports, about airspace, about the communication between you and the ATC or air traffic control. You will even learn about meteorology, about weather reports, about type of clouds or type of fogs, how the weather can change the outcome of the flight. Of course, you will also learn about performance of the airplane, how to properly manage the weight and balance of your own airplane, and how to navigate with your systems. I mean, these are just some of the general topics that you will learn inside your private pilot training, because it is something so extensive that we cannot cover in just one video, but at least you get the general idea of what you are going into. And for the fun part, for the practical part, the plane, the flight hours, you will learn how to check the airplane's condition before flying, every time you fly. Even if you just landed and after a couple of minutes you are preparing yourself for another flight hour on the same airplane, you always check it on the ground before flying. Always. You'll learn how to properly start the engine. You'll learn how to follow a checklist, how to taxi the airplane through the airport, how to take off and how to land the airplane, how to make a traffic pattern to approach the airport, how to properly communicate with the ATC, again, the air traffic control, that means the tower. They are always there to help you. Your instructor will first prepare you for your first solo flight. You will practice the emergency procedures for different situations on the airplane, and you'll practice how to take off and land, and take off and land once and once and once again, until you make your first solo flight. Let me tell you, that flight will be amazing. You will never forget that flight. And if you are not too familiarized with what happens after your first solo flight, I'm not going to talk about that on this video. And I don't want you to search for that either, because that is a surprise. Let's just say that's a celebration that you will only live once. And believe me, you don't want to spoil yourself that celebration. But after all that, you will continue your training and you will fly some cross-country hours. You will visit different airports and see some new landscapes from what you have been seeing up until this point. You'll take a ton of photos because, let's face it, we all sometimes take photos from the views. And also a lot of selfies here and there, and another picture of the landscape. You know, you'll enjoy those hours. They are meant to be enjoyed. But also to learn. Don't forget to learn while you are making your cross-country flights. After all, if you are not enjoying your aviation career, you are probably doing it wrong. It's supposed to be fun, of course with your responsibilities, but you're supposed to have fun. If you have fun while you're learning, you're going to learn even more. Those cross-country flights are going to be the most peaceful of all, because during most of the flight you will have a very low workload. You'll be just flying the airplane. And finally, you will review the maneuvers that you have been slowly learning during your whole training process. Here you will show to the instructor your dexterity and skill to fly the airplane. Like for example, you will perform some slow flights with and without flaps. You will demonstrate some stalls and even chandelles. And once your instructor firmly believes that your knowledge as well as your flight skills are good enough, you will face the final check ride for your private pilot license. Here an examiner will come and ask you questions about the knowledge that you have learned during your ground school. This experience will kinda be like an interview for a job. That's what they want. You will both talk with each other and hopefully the conversations just flows naturally. And when the examiner expects you to answer his questions, don't get nervous. The examiner is not there to screw you up. He just wants to see how much he can talk with you about aviation. It's a conversation, remember that. If everything goes as planned, he will ask you to do practically everything you have been learning during your whole training up to this point. But you only have 1 hour to do it. And you have to show him that you are ready to become a private pilot. So I hope this information gives you a good overview of what a private pilot training is. And I hope to have encouraged you to begin your private pilot training if most of what I've said sounds good to you. If this video helps at least one person that is constantly thinking about becoming a pilot, this video has done enough. Remember that there is no career where everything is going to be good the whole time. That's just not realistic. There is no career in this world that is always just going to be fun and laughter. Some of the time you're just going to put your head down and do the hard work, because you know that what comes ahead is what you're looking for, being a private pilot. Before we continue with the instrument rating video, I wanted to mention that if you want to become an outstanding private pilot, if you are curious and you want to prepare yourself in the best possible way for all the tests to come, or even if you are an advanced pilot who wants to remember and perfect the basics of the VFR world, or maybe you want to start your private pilot training with a heads up over the others, I highly recommend you should check out my book Essential Knowledge for Private Pilot. You will find the link of the book in the description of this video. It is an Amazon Kindle exclusive. This book uses the two most effective study techniques in the whole world, active recall and spaced repetition, and it applies them into aviation. If that sounds good to you, then please go check out the book down below. You will be helping me a lot with this channel. The book is available in English as well in Spanish. Remember, you shouldn't be studying hard, you should be studying effectively, and with this book you can do just that. That was just a little plug. Now let's continue with your instrument rating. So today we're gonna talk about your instrument rating. This video is for those of you who have already finished your private pilot training and are looking to take the next step towards becoming a professional pilot. So let's begin. This is the second video of this series where I try to break down what you will be studying and practicing during your pilot training, so you can get a better idea of what you're getting yourself into. For this video, we're gonna be breaking down the instrument rating. How does it work and what you will have to do? What you will experience during this quote-unquote harder part of your general aviation career. First, I have to say that if you just completed your private pilot license, you can indeed begin right away with your commercial pilot license. But most people decide to do their instrument rating before their private pilot license, because a commercial pilot without an instrument rating is practically useless when compared to a commercial pilot that has his instrument rating. Because if you are a commercial pilot without an instrument rating, you have certain limitations, like you cannot fly with passengers at night, or not being able to travel further than 50 nautical miles from the airport where you took off. Because after 50 nautical miles, the weather can be very different from where you took off. You can possibly find bad weather and you are not certified to fly within bad weather. Therefore, trying to work as a commercial pilot without an instrument rating can be very difficult, or even impossible to do if what you're trying to do is becoming an airline pilot. By the way, you must be at least a private pilot to start your instrument rating. You can't start your aviation studies with this rating, because you need a solid basis of aviation knowledge. The reason why I consider the instrument rating to be more difficult than your private pilot license is because theoretically it is way more demanding of your time. It has way more knowledge, concepts, minimums, rules, regulations, limitations, communications, chart symbols, and overall theory that you will have to learn, and also a lot of the times you will have to memorize. You know that during your private pilot license you could learn something and then explain it with your own words. That means you comprehend what you are talking about. But here in your instrument rating, you will also have to memorize. You will have to memorize symbols, numbers, concepts, acronyms, and much more. You will have to memorize a lot. As a general idea of what you will learn during your IFR training, you will learn how to fly the airplane from takeoff to landing without practically ever looking outside your cockpit. You will practically fly while being blind, just being guided by the instruments in front of you. It doesn't matter if outside of your plane there is a storm, clouds, fog, or the darkness of the night. As I said in the previous video, again link in the video description, all licenses and ratings can be divided into ground school and flight hours. If you have already done your private pilot license, you know that ground school is very similar in a way to the university. You are sitting in a desk taking notes while the teacher, or in this case the instructor, is in the front of the room explaining the lesson. For this rating, inside your classroom, you will first have a quick refresh of the most important knowledge you have acquired during your private license. That knowledge that is relevant for the lessons to come. And after that, you will learn a lot more in depth about human factors. Because now, those possible risks that you and the flight crew might be running into will be exponentially more dangerous. Because many times you will be limited by the information from your instrument. Remember, sometimes you won't be able to look outside the window to know what is happening outside the airplane because of the weather. During ground school, you will learn as well about your new flight instruments. Of course, you will have a refresh of all the instruments that you have been using up to this point. You know, your basic instruments. But now you will also be learning about instrument navigation, two of the most common instrument navigation of nowadays. You will learn how to rely just by your instruments. You will learn how to rely on your attitude indicator. And you will learn how to properly put the right amount of attention to each specific instrument, because some of them need more of your attention than others. Here you will learn about radials, how to intercept them and how to follow them. So yeah, a big part of this training is to teach you how to use all the instruments that you have been using up to this point even better than before, and how to start using your navigation instruments that you probably haven't been using. So you will learn some new instrument parts and some new instrument principles as well. And you will even be learning about how to use your PFD, your primary flight display, and also your multifunction display. As I have already said in this video, you will see a lot of theory during this rating, and the instruments are no exception. You will learn how to have interpretations of the different instruments, because the information they give you may sometimes collide with each other. But we can keep talking about the topics that you're going to be studying within the instrument principles all day. That's not the idea of this video. So let's just say that you will see a lot of new theory about the instruments of the airplane. You think you knew everything? Well, think again. And I took a bath. But you won't only learn how to use every single instrument on the airplane. You will also learn how they work, what makes them function in the way they do. You will practice different techniques to effectively cross-check the instruments while flying without a visual reference outside the airplane, and during heavy workload periods. Of course, you will also learn new stuff about airports and airspace. Probably you will learn about new airport signs and runway markings, along with a completely new airspace where you haven't flown before. And that one is Class Alpha airspace, an airspace that only knows IFR flights. That means that no visual pilot is allowed inside. Along those lines, you will also need to learn a whole new way to communicate through the radio, because IFR comms are very different from what you are used to during your VFR flights. It's practically a whole new phraseology that you will have to learn. But all in all, you'll only have to do what you did to learn how to communicate during your first flight hours of your private license. Practice, practice, and practice. Don't be afraid to make a couple of errors in the radio. Don't sweat it, man, we all have done it. Of course, you will also learn about instrument charts, departure charts, vectors, airport charts, approach charts, and route charts, arrival charts, charts, and more charts with a good amount of procedures. From my money, I would have to say that the instrument charts are the very heart and soul of the instrument rating, and will be your day-to-day during your airline career in the future. Don't worry that much either, they are not that hard to read. But they do usually have a lot of little symbols that you will have to learn the meaning of. And to end this whole instrument charts deal, you will have to study about ILS approaches, VOR approaches, and RNAV approaches. They are all different instrument procedures for you to safely land the airplane during an instrument flight. These are the three most common instrument approaches of nowadays. This means that you don't land the airplane by looking outside the cockpit. You land it by reading and following the path that the charts are telling you to follow. Unless there is something like a hurricane or a super severe thunderstorm on your way, if you perform in the right way all of these charts that I have mentioned, regardless of the weather, you will not run into any risk of crashing your airplane with another airplane, or against the terrain for that matter. You will be taking your airplane from one airport to the other in no time. Ending up this segment of what you will see during your ground school, you will see a lot more in depth about meteorology in general, way more than what you saw during your private license. This one might not be the most exciting topic to talk about, or to learn about for that matter. At least it isn't for me. But it is extremely important for your own in-flight safety. This means perfecting your reading of the weather reports like METAR and TAF, revisiting weather factors that might be present during your day-to-day flights, and of course weather hazards. And finally, you will have to learn what to do during emergencies that can happen to you while being on an IFR flight environment. What should you do with your airplane on an emergency where you can't see anything outside the cockpit because of the bad weather that it is present? Sounds pretty scary to be flying blind during an emergency, right? Oh, I almost forgot. You will also learn how to make IFR flight plans. Because yes, they are different from a BFR flight plan. But once again, you will learn how to do it with practice in no time. So don't sweat it, man. That's it for the ground school portion of your instrument rating. I want to say that these topics that I have mentioned up to this point are not in any particular order, because the order in which they are taught can be changed from one flight school to the other. As you can see, the theory that you will be studying during this rating is fairly big, bigger than the private pilot license theory. We have spent all this time just scratching the surface of the topics that you are going to see, basically just naming them. We are not talking about any one of them in particular, but hey, we wanted to be pilots, right? Now that we are finally done talking about the ground school, we can talk about the flight hours. Remember when I said that the instrument rating was harder than the private pilot training, right? Well, that's very true for the ground school. But I'm willing to say that the instrument rating becomes a little bit easier when it comes down to the flight hours. That is, only if you have very clear in your head this whole idea of instrument flying. I mean, you don't need to learn again how to properly take off or land the airplane. You have already practiced all of that hundreds of times during your flight hours of your private pilot license. Neither you have to learn how to maintain straight-in level flight, perform complicated maneuvers with the airplane, nor practice the emergencies of the engine. Your instructor will not be focused on that for the most part of your flight hours this time, because of the understanding that you should already know that, just by having your private pilot license with you. Of course, you can dedicate a couple of hours during your training to refresh that, but that's just not the main point for you right now. I said that the flight hours are easier because when it comes down to practice, when we talk about dexterity, all you have to do during this rating is just flight the airplane. You take the airplane up in the air, then back to the ground, and you make some turns here and there. But there is a catch. While you're doing this, your brain is worrying and thinking about 1000 different things at the same time. Like, for example, correctly reading the instrument charts and listening to the radio for the ATC instructions that can sometimes become a little bit complicated, while cross-checking all your instruments over and over again. But man, what am I exactly going to do during my instrument hours? Well, you will start by going into the flight simulator. I talked a lot about the flight simulator during my first video, so once more I will leave the link of that video in the description down below. But basically over there on your flight simulator, you will learn how to intercept, track, and follow radials. Those are basically invisible highways up in the air that take care of taking your airplane from one airport to the other. In the flight sim, you will learn how to read all the charts that I have mentioned before, how to flight into bad weather, how to perform the ILS procedure and all the others approach procedures, but at a slower pace than on the real airplane. And that's extremely useful over here on the instrument rating, because when you get confused in the flight simulator, you and your instructor will only pause the sim and you both will sort out the confusion without the rush of the real flight and the complicated communications with the ATC, something that you cannot do during the real flight. So basically, first you will fly into the flight simulator, and then you will transfer all that knowledge and practice to the real airplane. But either on the flight simulator or in the airplane, your training will probably go something like this. First, you will learn how to track and follow radials. You will have to understand this radials concept very clear from your ground school. Once you are comfortable with following radials, you will learn about holding patterns and procedure turns. For these two, you will have to do exactly the same, track and follow radials, but in a very specific way. You will notice that almost everything inside the instrument flight hours is based around radials. Even the departure charts and route charts and arrival charts that I've mentioned before, everything is about radials. And now that you are getting good following these radials, you will get to fly the real instrument charts. You will discover that your airport has a whole set of instrument charts, just like the ones that you are seeing on your screen right now. You will learn to read them, to understand them, to comprehend them, and you will learn all the secrets inside those instrument charts. As I said before, when it comes down to the actual flying, you will discover that the instrument rating is pretty easy. Because what you have to do in order to nail a flight is to study and understand the theory. There is not much I can say about the flight hours itself. You will just keep on practicing what I have already said. You will be practicing the instrument charts of the airport of your flight school and possibly also the instrument charts of the airports nearby over and over again. So for example, here you have a very easy instrument chart. This is a standard instrument departure chart. You can see the name SID over there, that's what it stands for, Standard Instrument Departure. The name of the chart is Yankee Sierra Victor 1 Bravo Departure. That's the name of the chart, like your own name. Charts happen to also have a name. And this is for the airport Mike Sierra Sierra Sierra. And basically what you have to understand of this chart is this. You see that little line over there? Well, that's the runway. So in this airport we have two runways, runway 33 and runway 15. For this specific chart we are taking off the airplane from the runway 33. So we will be taking off with a heading of 334. We have to climb with our airplane at or above 3,500 feet over the sea level, and we cannot exceed the 5 nautical miles from the airport. So here you can see that we have to turn to the right to the heading 172. As you can see right now, we are heading back to the airport, but you see that 5,000 over there? Well, that means that by the time that we come back to the airport, we must be at 5,000 feet. And you can see that 352 with the letter R to the left side. Well, that's the radial that we will be following in this case. So by now we will be flying the heading 172 and the radial 352 inbound. That means that with this radial we are getting closer to the airport. And you see those little arrows over there? Well, that's the holding pattern that I was talking about before. So when you are vertically over the airport at 5,000 feet, you must perform that holding pattern. As you can see over there, the holding pattern is telling us that we have to fly in the heading 352 and 172 for 1 minute each. How do we know that it is 1 minute? A standard holding pattern will always be 4 minutes long. That means that we will be spending 1 minute flying heading 352, 1 minute turning to the right, 1 minute flying heading 172, and 1 minute more turning to the right, going back to the heading 352. So in a nutshell, this is what an instrument chart looks like, and this is what you will be doing during your whole instrument training, your flight hours of the instrument training. So, wrapping up all this, when it comes down to the dexterity and the practice that you have with your airplane, this should be the easiest part of your career. But when we talk about the mental workload that you will be submitting yourself into, instrument training can be and will be brutal. This rating is a lot more theory-based, memorization and knowledge-heavy than the private license. But that's the fun about aviation, right? You will have to overcome a lot of different challenges. Like in this case, learning how to fly blind because of the bad weather that you are flying into. And don't forget, the instrument rating expands your possibilities to a whole new world. It truly is the basis for those of you pilots who want to pursue an airline career. No plug this time. You should have already bought the book. So now let's continue with the commercial pilot license. So today we're going to talk about what you will learn and practice during your commercial pilot license. Why do you need it for if you already have your private pilot license? In this video we're going to be talking about the commercial pilot license and breaking down what you should expect from it. What you should expect from the ground school portion as well as in the flight hours. If you have already completed your private pilot license, which you probably have if you're watching this video, then there is actually not much new to talk about in this license. But there are always some nice things to know and to remember. Okay, so let's begin with your commercial pilot license. Chances are that if you're looking to start your commercial license, you have definitely completed your private pilot license and probably your instrument rating too. Because as I have said in other videos, unless you have a pretty particular job opportunity where you are sure that you don't need an instrument rating, a commercial pilot without one is pretty much useless. With that said, let's start as always with the ground school portion for your commercial pilot license. By this point, you probably already know that this portion of your training, it's pretty much just like being in a normal university classroom. So that's all I'm going to say about that. It is still pretty much the same classroom from your private pilot license and instrument rating. So let's continue with what you will learn during this license. And to be honest, the answer of that is pretty much a lot of the same of what you saw during your private pilot license. That is, aerodynamics, instruments of the airplane, weather and weather reports, advanced human factors, airspace and airports, emergency procedures. As you can see, it is pretty similar to what you have already seen before. You will just relearn a lot of the stuff that you have maybe forgotten. We all do. And you will learn one or two new things about each topic. It is kind of like going from first grade to second grade in school, where during both of those years you learned about addition and subtraction, but it was just 1% harder during second grade. So commercial pilot ground school is that second grade for you. That is about those topics. The only point where I think you will see a fairly amount of new stuff is on the performance portion of the ground school, along with the high performance airplanes and complex airplanes portion. First, when we talk about performance, yes, you will see a lot of the same stuff that you saw during your first license. That means those takeoff and landing charts, if you remember, weight and balance, your fuel estimations, wind calculations and all of those things that nobody liked, but now it will get a little bit more complicated. It is most likely that during your flight hours you're not just going to fly your beloved Cessna 152 or some airplane along those same lines. You will probably start flying faster airplanes with retractable landing gear, high-performance power plants and controllable pitch propellers. So, as you will have to learn the performance limitations of these new, faster and more complicated airplanes, I'd say this is the only thing that really stands out to me from the ground school you'll receive for this license. Now let's continue with the flight hours, and one more time you will see plenty similarities from your private pilot license. I'd say that this time it could be even easier for you. That is because you don't have to learn again how to take off and land the airplane. You have learned all that. And you also won't have to prepare yourself for your first solo flight. That's done. Funny enough, if you are coming from your instrument rating, one of the most difficult things you will have to do is to get used to see the outside world of your cabin and your instruments. At least during my first hours after finishing my instrument rating, I found myself constantly fixated to my instruments while doing visual maneuvers. But continuing talking about things that you will do during your commercial license, you will practice and perfect your touch and goes. The maneuvers you used to perform during your private pilot license, like chandelles and lazy eights, steep turns, stalls, and emergency procedures in the airplane. I think that the only maneuver, at least for me during this license, was the 8 on pylons, and they were fairly easy. Again, just imagine what you did and learned during your private pilot license, but with a few new tweaks here and there. One more time, as I said before, the biggest difference between your private pilot license and your commercial pilot license is when it comes to fly the high performance and complex airplanes. But mostly it is just a matter of you learning the new pilot's operating handbook, or POH, and learning new specific procedures for a specific new airplane. I cannot say much more about that because every flight school has their own airplane of choice. Just know that the airplanes will be a little bit faster and the procedures you will be performing on them will be a little bit longer. You can think of those flight hours like a prep for what is to come when you start your multi-engine rating. I almost forgot to mention that you will probably be making a lot and lots of cross-country flights, considerably more than what you did during your private pilot license. So be prepared to see some new environments and some new airports where you possibly haven't been before. So take it easy and enjoy those flights. Go ahead and take some pictures of the new views you will have. Remember, it is always easier for you to learn during the flight if you're having a good time. So use those cross-country flights to lose some stress. Of course, as I have said on some of my previous videos, don't forget to use some of your flight simulator hours, evenly distributed here and there. I won't say how many of them because every flight school has their own predetermined number of simulator hours for each license, and you should probably use them when you are transitioning from your usual airplane to the more complicated ones, the high performance and complex airplanes we talked about before. So you can learn the procedures in the simulator. Pause if you need to check on what you're missing, start over, and go slower if you need to. That way it will be easier for you, and you won't waste your flight hours in the real airplane on that. And finally, maybe you are here because you have this question. Like, what's the point of this license if like 80% of what you have said I have already done it during my private pilot license? Well, the answer to that is actually pretty simple. If you don't have your commercial pilot license, you can't charge for your services. You can't earn money by flying. That means you can't be hired by anybody. Or at least you can't be paid on that job if you don't have this license. And that is pretty much the whole reason about it. It practically is a permission for you to charge for your services, to charge for your work as a pilot. Now we are moving to the multi-engine rating. Time for you to fly something a little bit faster. Just so you know, you can also follow me in Instagram. The link is also down below in the description. So today we're gonna talk about your multi-engine rating. It is the time for you to fly something a little bit more complicated than what you're used to. video we're gonna talk about what you will see, what you will learn during your multi-engine rating, during ground school as well as in your flight hours. Why do you need it, or if you even need it? What will be new for you and what will be a refresher? With this rating, you will be getting a little taste of the airplanes that you will be flying when you land your first job at an airline. At least how they work. Alright, so multi-engine rating. Just to be clear, this is a rating, like the instrument rating. It's not a license. If you're watching this video, chances are that you have already completed your private pilot license and your commercial pilot license as well, along with your instrument rating. Up to this point, you have probably just been flying single-engine airplanes. Complex airplanes, high-performance airplanes or not, it has always been just one engine in front of you. But now you will be flying an airplane that has one engine on each side of the cockpit. I mean, one on each wind, right? From this point, you should always have in the back of your mind the idea that you will be flying a faster, more complicated, heavier and more serious airplane than before. Know that it will be a bigger responsibility for you. As usual, let's start with the ground school. There is not much to talk about this. It is a much shorter ground course than the ones that you have already received during your private pilot license, instrument rating, or commercial pilot license. For the most part, you will be learning about some new airplane parts that this new airplane has and your single-engine airplane probably didn't. You will be learning how to control a propeller that can change its own angle, if for some reason you haven't learned that yet. You'll learn the specific procedures of the airplane of your school, of course. You will have to study and memorize a lot of the pilot operating handbook, the emergency procedures for that airplane, how to feather an engine during an emergency landing, and how does the retractable landing gear works, just to say some stuff. To sum this up, everything you'll see during this course will be about this new airplane you're going to fly. You won't learn much more about things like aerodynamics, airspace or something along those lines. Let's now talk about the flight hours, the more interesting part. If you have seen the previous videos of this series, you know how important it is to me to use your flight simulator hours. And it is no exception for this case. Use your simulator flight hours so then you can get the most out of your real flight hours in the real airplane. Please don't waste them. I cannot overstate how important it is to always learn first on the flight simulator what you're going to do in the real airplane. I'll give you 3 main reasons why I praise so much the flight simulator hours. 1. Because you can pause. 2. You can restart. And 3. You can control absolutely everything that is happening around you during the flight. It's simple, but it makes a world of difference for someone that is just starting to learn and to know a new airplane. If you get partially lost, you can just pause the simulator and ask your instructor for guidance. If you have completely lost idea of what the heck you're doing, or if the instructor sees that you're doing everything terribly wrong, you can always restart the flight from zero, and you will have a new chance like nothing ever happened. And on top of that, you can do so many things that you just won't be able to do in the real airplane, simply because it will be too dangerous. You can control the weather to your own will. Like, how freaking cool is that? Like, you can even be in any airport you want. And the list of things that you can do just goes on and on. So yeah, do your simulator hours so you don't waste your flight hours on the real airplane. It is very simple. Now, what you will actually do during your flight hours is actually very similar to what you did during your private pilot license. You will learn how to take off and how to land the airplane. Feel and get comfortable with how fast it is. You will do some steep turns and some maneuvers with it. You will perform the emergency procedures from your pilot operating handbook, like landing with just one working engine, or what you should do if your landing gear isn't working or something like that, and possibly some cross-country flights if you have the time. You will practically learn how to safely fly a multi-engine airplane. So nothing so fancy. Remember that this time you won't have the same amount of time that you had for your previous licenses. Wrapping up all this, the reason to get a multi-engine rating is very simple. If you want to be hired someday by an airline, just like with your instrument rating, this is a must-have for you. Simply because absolutely every single important airline in the world flies with multi-engine airplanes. That means 2 or more engines. So yeah, basically you have no option here if what you want is to work for an airline in the future. With this rating, you are finally entering a world of a more serious, faster and complicated airplanes of general aviation that demands more of you in every aspect. But it should be a fun challenge to overcome nonetheless. And even if it is not for an airline job, just like pretty much every other rating, it will open some new doors for you. In the world of aviation, there is a variety of different jobs where you will need this rating, so by all means, go ahead. And finally, we are moving to the fifth and last big step of your general aviation career, the instructor pilot certificate. Let's now see where you should consider going for this last step before applying to an airline. So today we're gonna talk about the instructor pilot license, something that I think every pilot should experience at some point during their career. We will be breaking down what you should expect from the ground school portion as well as for the flight hours portion. Why is this course so different to the ones that you have already completed before? Plus the answer to why you should become an instructor in the first place, and why you need to have real confidence in yourself to be a good instructor. The instructor pilot license. For many of us, the last step before trying to land a job at an airline. Let's start breaking down this, shall we? As always, there is going to be a ground school and flight hours for this last step. And if you're about to start this license, well, chances are that you have already completed your private pilot and commercial pilot courses, instrument rating, and probably also the multi-engine one. And you already know how this ground school environment is. But if for some reason you are new into the world of aviation and you are watching this video and you want to know more about what can you expect from a ground school in general, like how will be the teacher, your classmates, the classroom and all that stuff. First of all, hi, it's nice to have you here. But assuming that we all know how the air of a ground school portion is, let's see what you will learn over there. Now that you are starting with your instructor pilot license, you are going to be slowly stopping to being a student and you're going to start learning how it is to be a teacher, an instructor. Someone that is always trying to learn new stuff and passing on that knowledge at the same time. During this ground school, you will notice that the main purpose of it's not trying to show you much more new stuff about aviation. You already know what it is to be a pilot, how to fly in different kind of general aviation airplanes. You already have a good solid basis for yourself. Right now, what is important is for you to start learning how to teach others, how to pass on the knowledge that you have been accumulating during your whole career. That same knowledge that someone else passed to you. The instructor pilot ground school is to teach you how to teach others. You will learn about pedagogy, how to deal with different kind of people that possibly think and learn a whole lot different than you. New student pilots with zero knowledge about aviation, possibly younger than you. You will learn how there are different methods to help different kind of people to learn in the same way. Because if you think that the way you understood something, how you study, how you learn from your instructor, and how your brain works is just like everyone else's, think again. There is always someone that sees things in a different way. that learn in a different way. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is wrong. Or maybe you will meet with someone that doesn't learn as fast as everyone else. And you have to deal with all of that no matter what. You are the instructor. Be the instructor they need you to be to learn and understand properly. It is always easy to be the instructor of those who learn everything at the first try. But you have to be capable of teaching beyond those students. Now, about the flight hours, we need to talk about this. During this whole time, you have been sitting on the left side of the airplane, but now that will change. You will start sitting on the right side, where your instructor has been this whole time, because now it is the time for you to start learning how it is to be an instructor, the instructor. You won't have to teach students only in the ground, but also in the air. You will use your first flight hours to get comfortable with this new seat and the changes it brings, like flying the airplane with your right hand and controlling the power setting with the left one. But you will find that it is not that difficult to fly the airplane from this new perspective. Next up, after that, you will do a little bit of all during your flight hours. Touch and goes, all the kind of maneuvers that you have already performed, also some instrument flights so you don't forget about that, emergency procedures, you name it, because you will be practicing it. But on top of that, now you will also have the goal to learn how to teach all of what you're doing to someone else. Always remember that now you are trying to learn how to be an instructor, how to teach all that to someone else. But don't worry, your instructor will help you with that. He will be the one teaching you how to be the teacher. Even at some point, he will probably play the role of a student. And you will have to teach him stuff, which I always found hilarious because he was the instructor. Of course, as always, you will have some flight simulator hours. After that, you will end with your theory exam and final check ride at the end of the whole license, where you will be asked to act like a real instructor pilot. Alright, you might have this question since the beginning of the video or maybe even before. Why do I want to be an instructor pilot if I already have everything that it takes to be on an airline? I mean, I have my instrument rating, my commercial pilot license, my multi-engine rating. I have everything I need to seek a job somewhere else. Well, the first easy answer to that is to get more flight hours. Make some more experience and not continue paying for it. Instead of that, you start getting paid for it. This can be some kind of first job as a pilot. You start getting as many flight hours as you can or as you need in order to get a better job. All that is true and it is all well and good. But there can also be a second answer, one that personally I was lucky enough to discover for myself. That answer is because you have no idea of how much you will learn when you are trying to teach stuff to someone else. You can discover that you actually like being a teacher. It's just exciting for you and you like seeing other students becoming pilots, just like you did. You have no idea of how many experiences and happy memories you will create just by being an instructor. Remember, even though you are still a student, and you will always be a student inside the world of aviation and in life in general, now you are also preparing to teach someone that has less knowledge than you. You are about to be someone's new guide into this world, and you need to be prepared and be confident about yourself. Now, I'm not telling you to fake confidence, please don't do that. Please keep in mind that in this career there is always going to be the life of someone in the line. And confidence inspires more confidence. If you seem like someone that has confidence in yourself, you will make your students feel confident about themselves, about what they are learning, about who they are learning from. Think about this in this way. Your students have to feel the same trust that you felt when you saw your instructor during your very first flight hours. So with all that said, How can you be confident in yourself? How can you gain confidence, real confidence? By not pretending to be someone you are not. Preparing yourself, studying. The best antidote for insecurity is to study and prepare yourself for what you are about to do. Practice being an instructor. Actively search to be the best instructor you can be. An instructor that today is better than the day before. Yeah? You will probably be nervous the first time you're going to teach your own class to real students, or the first time you're going to fly for real as an instructor. That's perfectly normal, but you can fight all that back if you have studied enough and prepared yourself for what you're about to do, and you can convince yourself about that. That is the whole truth. You have in your own hands the class of instructor that you want to become. So that's the end of this very long video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or at least found it somewhat interesting, please give it a like. If you learned something new, then I'll appreciate quite a lot if you consider subscribing to the channel. And if you just feel like it, you can also follow me in Instagram. The link is also down below in the description. I upload very cool photos over there. I try to upload videos every week, mainly explaining topics that has to do in a way or another with the IFR world, but in a logical order. Also, I will probably be talking a lot about aviation and education in general, but always trying to contribute something new to you. If you have a question or an opinion about something I said during this video, or if you want to talk to me about something, please feel free to comment down below, or you can get in touch with me in Instagram. I would love to hear what you have to say. If you found this video interesting, then you should go check out the other complete video I made, this time about ADM or aeronautical decision making, or maybe the whole playlist about human factors. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video. Bye!